school districts to work on that. One of the areas that we didn't see any additional communication on was in the vendor job area. And I know that the department did put out some guidance, but somehow there seems to be a communication gap because at least, and it wasn't a huge sample, but the 7 or 8 of some of the larger school districts that we talked to, they didn't think they got that guidance. And so I think it's real important to make sure there's follow-up, that everybody's on board and in fact is receiving the guidance and applying it.
Right. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a comment with regard to oversight of the Department of Education. Absolutely, it's a separate constitutional office, but the State Auditor's Office in California has a responsibility for conducting the single audit. We audit the Department of Education every single year, looking at all of the federal programs and make recommendations to the Department of Education. The other thing that I think that can happen in California, and I've been working with the California legislature, because I really appreciate Congress being very actively involved in the Recovery Act. What I did earlier this year, or back in 2009, was met with the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, which is a bicameral committee of assembly members and senators, to educate them about the Recovery Act and the importance of the Recovery Act to their districts and to their constituents. So we're working as an oversight entity to get the legislature more engaged in oversight and enforcing, helping me, because I don't have enforcement authority, to get state entities to implement recommendations. So in the past few months, the Joint Legislative Audit Committee has had hearings on some of the reports that I've issued and is planning to have some subsequent hearings over the next couple of months, so that the legislature in California is doing what Congress is doing, getting engaged and making sure that, certainly at the state level, that the state agencies are making change and correcting problems that we've identified, but we certainly have a very strong oversight role when it comes to the State Department of Education. So there is an independent auditor looking at education.
And for the Recovery Task Force's point of that, we've been working not only to educate the legislature, but we've had a county-by-county breakdown of the Recovery Act funding that have come, if you will, into the state. We now have it by congressional district, and we're working on Assembly District and Senate District, so that the members understand by category what's actually coming in, how we can work together, which organizations can we go and target better and say, you here, these nonprofits could participate in this program or that program. So we're trying to work alongside in doing that.
Right. Go ahead, otherwise. Any other members? Yes.
Yeah, are you putting that online?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where are you showing how to access that online?
Okay, we're showing it everywhere and anywhere that we can possibly
Try the
do.
California cable. Each city
That's-
has public access
That's a great
channels.
idea. That's a great
Because
idea.
otherwise, you have the information and nobody else other than the electeds or the agencies know about it.
Well, we also are doing significant, as I said, we've had about 45,000 people. Now granted, that's a small number in the state, but we've gone out to various communities. I just did for Speaker Bass.
I know, but think of the county of LA, 12 million people.
Yeah, I live here. I know. Well, yeah,
That's
so
the
I
point.
got you.
Ms. Chick, one of the things that you mentioned was the Work Investment Board, the WIB. And back in my city council days, I found them to be very lacking in being able to do the job they were supposed to do, because they were hiring the same companies. The companies would once they trained the people, they would let them go and hire another one to get that subsidy. I would love a copy of the report, because that to me is critical to be able to ensure that people who need job training, who can maybe then proceed to moving into jobs that will be available, especially if they're green energy jobs.
So if I might,
Quickly, because I have very brief.
the Work Investment Act needs revisiting. And it would be a wonderful time and way at some point soon for Congress to reassess.
Well, let's work on that.
Right.
We'll get something in the
Okay,
record.
because I agree with and I'm doing more WIB reports, and I'll be happy to forward them all to you.
Thank you. And Mr. Schultz, the California Recovery Task Force, do you work with small businesses to be able to do job training along with the WIB?
Absolutely. We have a small business advocate and small business.
Again, who knows about it?
I think that We go out to all of the major small business organizations across the state.
How about the
We
chambers?
write newsletters, all the chambers. We've worked with every major
The cities.
chamber, the cities. We just met with the California State Association of Counties, with the cities. We go to their meetings.
Contract
We
cities,
make
California
contract cities.
Okay.
We've been to them all.
Try again the public access channel.
That one we will do.
The
And that's a great suggestion.
weatherization issue, there has been in the past much fraud perpetrated on senior citizens on weatherization and many other home improvement areas. Do you also work with the California, is it the licensing board that goes out and does a lot of fraud prevention to be able to understand that this is part of where the money's going to is weatherization?
Yes, absolutely. And with it, not only with those organizations, but with the organizations that represent seniors, children, low income, County Welfare Directors Association, all of them, we've been out visiting, doing their meetings, talking about all these various programs, including
Do
weatherization.
you send notices to the cities to put on their reader boards for their public access channels?
We will need to do that. We do send out lots of press releases that go out
Press
to
releases
lots.
don't get on the public access channels.
Understand.
Okay.
And so that's a great suggestion, and I think we will do that.
I appreciate it. Ms. Calhoun, you talked about direct city funding. To me, that's one of the best things because many of the cities, the counties, or the state gets the money, by the time they take their admin fees and it trickles down to the locals, you've already lost 20 to 30% of the funding and administrative fees. How difficult would it be for direct funding to cities in being able to have all the things that go with it, the reporting, the access, everything? Because to me, they're, as you see, they're the ones who get the job done. They know where the requirements are for their locals to be able to do the hiring fund and know which businesses are legitimate, if you will, who are the bad guys. How difficult would it be? Is it a major task? Would it require more infusion of personnel to be able to oversee this?
Yes, it would require more oversight. I mean, as we've been talking all along, any entity, be it a city or a county or the state, that's getting funding needs to have the oversight that goes along with it. As far as how difficult would it be to set up the reporting infrastructure, Mr. Schultz can probably speak to that because they've had to do it at the state level. It's depending how many programs I think you're talking about. There's a fair amount that has to go into it. But I'll give you
Okay, well, that's okay.
Okay.
I'd rather you just go ahead because I'm already down to the nitty gritty here. Also, you talk about weatherization and that only 2% have been the 850 homes on the weatherization.
That is significantly at this point changed. We have almost, I believe, 900 that are completed, but about 3,000 others that have either started or
Explain the process. Who do you utilize? How do you, because there's David Bacon involved in being
Correct.
able to hire the contractors.
Correct. The initial strategy was to go out to existing weatherization providers because there's two programs in the state. One is a federal program, the low-income housing weatherization program, and there is a general weatherization program.
Okay, before you go further,
Sure.
you realize that International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers is working in tandem with NECA, National Electrical Contractors, to green buildings. My concept is why don't you start with hospitals, the community, the city council, the chambers, or whatever, the city owns stuff, schools, because they're the ones who need it the most to be able to save that money. A program that will help them be able to put up front money, loans, guarantees of some kind, and then be able to save in the long run all that money, which would put additional funds into teacher pay or all the other things. Why are we doing that also with homes? Because you can add it on, like reverse mortgage, for instance. Has anybody looked at those programs?
Well, I think in terms of, it depends on which programs you're talking about. If you're talking about the weatherization program, especially, as I said, as a former labor secretary to Governor Davis, we have recently been meeting with the IBW and with the laborers and other people to bring them into the weatherization program because the concern, since I've been on in the last 8 weeks, to be quite frank, is that in going with the original providers, it was probably a good strategy, but it wasn't an effective strategy. And the state fell down because it did not reach out broad enough to providers such as the ones that you're talking about. So I had a conversation with a labor official yesterday and said, let's walk through the Davis-Bacon requirements. I just want to make sure that you understand that we're fully supportive of you coming on and being subcontractors. There is a big difference between the prevailing wage in the state and the Davis-Bacon. In most areas, it's lower. But in this economy, I want to understand, as a former labor secretary, I think you probably want jobs in the area. You deserve jobs in the area. And some of the providers that originally were there, they opted out for 2 or 3 reasons that I mentioned earlier. One, many of them said, I don't want to do arts. The reporting requirements are too difficult. Secondly, some of them did say, I just don't want to do a government program where I'm going to have to get paid less. And the other one that was really significant is that there were some problematic agencies. And on Laura's advice and ours, we did not go out and contract with high-risk agencies. We have been able to work with them. So I'm with you.
Well, and I know my time is short, but one more comment and then I'll quit. And that is, Laura, you have a great idea. Why don't all the agencies work together to be able to strategize of what is priority? How do you manage to be able to do all the things we've been discussing here to protect the general public, to protect the monies of the general public, and to help us do a better job? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I think Councilwoman Watson, you okay?
Yes,
Okay, you go to Congresswoman Richardson.
Thank you. Got 5 questions in 5 minutes, so let's do them in about 30 seconds each. Ms. Howell, I thought I understood in your presentation you said that education had received about $1 million and had spent half of that. Did I hear you correctly?
The education there had been $1.6 billion advanced to local school districts, and those school districts, as of September of last year, had spent $570 million. That's why we had concern with cash management.
So, Mr. Payne, when you sat there and said you're doing a great job of oversight, that doesn't sound very great to me. So if you could include that in your report of what's missing. That means you're batting 30%, and if any of your students did 30%, they failed. So it's not.
Thank you, I appreciate
it's not
that.
enough.
And we will provide that. A little bit of context for the issue. The money was shipped consciously and overtly to stem the tide. It's done so, but it's also money that can be used over a period of time. And the context for the districts, of course, is that sort of the balance is about $45 billion of state and local funds, and as we know, 2 years ago that was over $60 billion of state and local funds, and about $7 billion of federal funds. And so they're dealing with on orders of magnitude a much bigger problem than just the buckets that can be filled with Recovery Act money. And so part of our struggle with them has been to encourage them to spend the money as quickly as possible. At the same time, their natural instinct has been to conserve because the budgets keep being back. From that perspective, we know what the rules are. We've been communicating with them that they've got to remit any funds that interest is unspent, and we're engaged with them in that and doing that very actively.
Mr. Payne, I
encouraging
read
them to spend.
Mr. Payne, I read Ms. Howell's report, and I believe the problems extended beyond that. So in your response to this committee, if you could address the questions that Ms. Howell had, and I would venture to say to you, my recommendation to the school districts with, for example, Long Beach Unified, we sent out 800 notices. I don't know if we have till next year, or 2 years from now. So the question would be, as we're considering closing schools, reducing classes, and all of that, I think some reevaluation has to take place. And you said you're providing oversight, and I'm saying, as a member today of this committee, it doesn't seem to be sufficient. So we'd like to hear further, what are you going to do? Number 2, Ms. Howell, you said that you've provided recommendations to the joint legislative body about things that they could implement. If you could provide this committee those, not only with education and any other departments. Mr. Schultz, you mentioned a district-by-district report. If you could supply that report to this committee.
Absolutely.
Also, the distress areas and how that has changed, if you could supply them to this committee. Mr. Schultz and Mr. Payne, as I mentioned in my entry-level comments when you were here, a lot of the recovery success has got to be that we as members believe and support the state and its departments. I had an instance where it was the first kickoff of the education event. I think California was named first. You guys had an event in my district. I didn't receive an invitation. I didn't receive notification. It was really a slap in the face. And so I would say to you, if if I have a second chance at the bite of the apple of recovery dollars, they're not going to you, they're going directly to the school districts. And those are some of the reasons why, some of the reasons that are written in the report, and I think just really an overall lack of respect and inclusion and working with other people who are trying to work with you to be successful. So I just wanted to say that. And finally, Ms. Schick and Mr. Payne. Ms. Schick offered the MOU. Are you willing to sign it?
Not at this time, we'll review it.
Haven't you already reviewed it?
Well, we have auditors of our own that do spot checks, and we also depend on Ms. Howell's organization to audit us as well.
Okay, but there
Yeah, I'm
couldn't be
talking
any-
about going out to, on the ground to actually look at what's going on at a school district. I would need that element.
So we would hope that you would reconsider that. I think Ms. Howell is doing a great job, as she obviously noted in her testimony. And I think Ms. Schick and what her office can provide could only help but not hurt. And if you're doing such a great job, you shouldn't be afraid of it. Look forward to your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the comments.
I would just like to make a final comment.
Sure.
I
Like
know.
the last gentleman from the district.
Thank you so very much. In the audience, we have a young man that has served on the city council of Inglewood. And I believe that since the former mayor has stepped down, I think Danny Tabor is acting mayor. However, we did not know that he was going to be here 3 days before, so we cannot call on him, Mr. Chairman. But he did ask some questions to the panel, and I would just like to throw them out. And if you're not prepared, then you can give them to us in writing. It's about the city of Inglewood, and it is adjacent to my district. It's the 33rd. My district is the 33rd, and I think that Inglewood is in the 35th congressional district. So they had been working with addressing transportation and the waste, fraud, and abuse in the use of stimulus funds. So if you have any information on how they are doing with that, we'd like to know. And has Inglewood experienced difficulty in getting funds into shovel-ready projects? If any of you know about Inglewood, particularly, we'd like to know. And what examples would you have of collaborating with the use of ARA funds? And so these are the questions that would have been asked should he have been able to testify. So if you have any information on Inglewood.
So, Madam, you say that what we need to do is just submit them in writing.
Yeah,
Let
okay.
them respond to them, whether they're being, they have to, whether they get the kind of information it is.
Yes, and with that said, I want to thank you so much for traveling here, and my colleagues too, and spending the time that you have with us. It's been very, very valuable. And I also want to again apologize for our mayor. We did not know he was leaving and so soon, but I was glad he was here, and he does have a written statement, and from that we can glean information that we will need as we shape policy. So with that, let me thank you for coming to Los Angeles and holding the hearing simultaneously with our subcommittee on procurement. It's been very informational. I want to thank all the witnesses for your valuable input. We will take this with us back to Washington, D.C.
But it's a pleasure being here with you, and of course, we regret that you were going to leave us, but the point is that you have made your mark. So, it's been a pleasure working with you. Let me just sort of say that publicly in your district. And let me just thank all the witnesses for their testimony, and I appreciate the interest of the members of Congress, the state and local government officials, and the California residents who attended this hearing today. In Washington, it is easy to stay behind blinders and only look at the big picture of government programs or outlays on a federal agency's balance sheet. It is easy to simply look at statistics and formulas that say that we have helped or that we should have helped a certain number of people with a particular dollar amount of federal spending. At some point, in order to really know what is going on, we have to step outside the box, go out into the field to hear from the providers and evaluators. businesses are getting back up on their feet. And it's about taking good, hard look at the federal dollars coming out of the bottom end of the funnel in order to make sure we are not losing taxpayers' dollars to waste, fraud, and abuse. It is clear from today's testimony that the Office of Management and Budget and federal agencies still need to work on providing guidance in a clear, consistent, and timely manner so that recipients of the Recovery Act dollars are able to comply with the requirements associated with those funds. It is also clear that some entities here in California, namely the California Department of Education, need to take more seriously the obligation to adhere to the transparency and accountability requirements that must go along with the use of Recovery Act funds. The testimony we heard today also demonstrates that while the Recovery Act has begun to create jobs and has provided much needed assistance to filling California's budget deficit, it also creates another promise, the promise of staggering administrative costs for its implementation and the very real threat of waste, fraud, and abuse. It is estimated that the cost of audit and oversight activities at the Recovery Act funds in the state will be over $6.5 million through fiscal year 2010 to 2011. And with the FBI warning that we can expect 7 to 10% of recovery dollars lost to fraud, in my view, every audit and every oversight activity that can be performed to prevent the waste of these funds are priceless. As such, I would like to again publicly call on the United States Senate to take action on the enhanced oversight of the State and Local Economic Recovery Act, which Congressman Issa and I introduced in order to help states and localities defray the expense of implementing the Recovery Act. Several members of this committee joined with me to pass that bill in the House. Nonetheless, the legislation is still being held up in the Senate. Today we have heard about things going right, things going wrong in the state of California. It is our job as members of Congress and as members of this committee to put what we have learned to constructive use. Whether we represent Brooklyn, New York, or East LA, we need to make sure that our nation's recovery efforts are tailored to work for all Americans, from coast to coast, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. Again, I thank our distinguished panel, of course, for coming today. Reserving the right to object, the record shall be left open for 7 days so that members may submit information for the record. And finally, without objection, I will